Welcome to the Product Leaders Edge podcast.
Artlist.io.
Welcome to the first episode of the Product Leaders Edge podcast. I'm your host, KJ Green. I am a product leader, an entrepreneur, and a lover of all things technology. And thank you so much for taking the time to join me for this first episode. I am so honored that you took the time to sit here with me in my living room to listen to me talk about the Product Leaders Edge podcast. And I'm so glad that you're here. This podcast actually started about almost a year and a half ago in late 2024, early 2025. Before I get into the founding story, I just wanted to say, this podcast was supposed to launch back in July 29th of 2025. And I held back because that was my birthday. That's when I turned 31. But I held back because I wasn't actually ready to put this podcast out to the world because I needed to continue to define vision and to just put out work that was authentic to the person that I was becoming, the founder that I'm becoming. Yeah, I just went through a lot of life shifts in 2025, like nothing crazy, but just like a lot of resets, pruning, just really getting settled into living in the New York City metropolitan area. And I just had a lot going on. So I had to put things on the shelf for now. So I'm here, I'm back. I'm actually re recording the episode because I had recorded this episode one. And after going through future recordings after that with guests, I just realized, I sounded real cringe. So I need to re record just to have a voice that's authentic to me. But I'm here pulling up my notes here. But essentially, the Product Leaders Edge podcast is going to really fold into my weekly Tech Tuesdays with KJ platform on LinkedIn. So this is essentially the live version of that, where I sit down solo or with guests to talk about product leadership, tech, culture, and just to show how product leadership is showing up in every aspect of our daily lives. And I was going to save this for later, but I just wanted to kind of ground us here in my central thesis for this podcast because product leadership shows up in every aspect, whether you are a business leader, a corporate product manager, a dentist, a therapist. If you are creating a product for another human, that's product leadership. And my thesis here is that product leadership isn't a corporate function, is a unitary discipline that shows up wherever humans are building, caring, deciding on uncertainty. Product leadership is a unitary discipline that tech formalized, but not necessarily invented because we were doing product leadership from the beginning of time. Tech just, again, formalized it, put it into mass production as these tech companies were growing, the Amazons and Microsofts of the world, as they were growing, they put product leadership thinking into the mass market. But it's been here for decades way before these companies were even thought of. Taking us back, I think product leadership is bigger than a job type, right? Product leadership is not confined to your corporate 9 to 5. And I'm not here to be a career coach. I just want to be clear on that front because I want to show how product leadership, as I mentioned, shows up wherever people are making decisions about what to build, who's it for, and why. And that encompasses founders, operators, barbers, therapists, dentists, your bodega owner. And if you live in New York City, you know what a bodega is. All practice this same discipline. And it's not cross-disciplinary, as I was saying, it's a unitary discipline. It's not borrowing ideas across fields. It's all one thing. It's one unitary way of thinking that is expressed in different environments. And the surface of product management, product leadership, if you will, changes with tools, industries, and context, but the logic stays the same because we're doing the same work of diagnosing human needs, designing experiences, managing systems, making a lot of trade-offs. Because as a business owner, as a product manager, you are making trade-offs every day. Should I launch today? Should I launch next year? Like I did. I made a trade-off. Should I ride the hype of launching this podcast on my birthday, or should I launch at the top of 2026? And the trade-off was, okay, I can launch on my birthday, put it out to the world, but it not be authentic to the person that I was becoming at the time. Or I can put it off, put it on the shelf, record episodes with guests, and just kind of grow alongside the process as opposed to chasing hype. Trade offs, right? Trade offs that we do every day. Iterating based on feedback. We see surveys every day in your email, at the end of a purchase. These surveys are important. There are product leaders on the other side of these surveys diagnosing, analyzing what you said as a consumer that either met your expectations or not. And again, this is not just in corporate America. This is in every business owner's toolbook, tool guide, whatever you want to call it. If you are a business leader, you have to diagnose the feedback from your customers, or else you won't be a business, point blank. And building trust over time. And how we see trust being built these days is through content creation. That's the grassroots work of building an audience. Like, this is really the wave in which content is being, excuse me, in which trust is being established in 2026 and beyond. And even before 2026, when social media came to rise, folks had, used social media for this very purpose of creating a brand and launching a product. People still do it the other way of launching a product and creating an audience. But I think the businesses that last today are the ones that do the latter of creating a brand and then launching a product. And product leadership, again, as I said, exists outside institutions. It existed before tech formalized it. Titles, credentials, org charts are just containers for this role. It's not the source of authority. True product leadership is about judgment and not frameworks. The frameworks are truly helpful, but it's those hard judgment calls that you have to make at the end of the day as a business leader, as a content creator, to what's going to bring the best ROI for your business, for your platform, for your brand. And why does the Product Leaders Edge podcast exist? Because I want to create a podcast. I'm playing. As a kid, I always wanted to have like my own like talk show in the traditional sense of being a talk show host. Probably me fulfilling that dream to a degree. But, I've developed mastery in the product leadership space. I have developed mastery in tech, and now I'm putting it out to the world. So that's really why this podcast exists. But more formally, this podcast explores product leadership, like I said, beyond the corporate lane. And, we will have conversations with founders, builders, operators, and solo creators. I am excited for you to see the future guest list that we have lined up. We have a lot of great individuals, a lot of great founders, operators who will be sitting across the screen and just talking about their businesses, talking about their challenges, talking about trends, and just catching up because a lot of these people are my friends in real life and they have done me favors of their time of giving me their time to have these conversations for you all. And like I said, I'm not a career coach. So the goal of this podcast isn't interview prep or resume optimization. We have really, really great podcasts for that. And that's not my space. Although like things may diverge in that area, but that's like not the core theme. And the goal here is to model how people reason through uncertainty in real systems because business is messy, product leadership is messy, the world is crazy. Like we have to make and negotiate things every day. So it's really just thinking through, what those real trade-offs looks like. And to a degree, I kind of want to just like lead the charge of a genre shift, like what reframing what product leadership actually is, and moving from product as a role to product leadership as an identity because as a business owner, you have to take on an identity. You're either the face of your brand, your product is the face of the brand, but you take on an identity of carrying the weight of making this business profitable. Wanting to shift from frameworks are helpful. I went to a top business school, so I know frameworks are helpful, but you have to make a decision at the end of the day, at the end of that framework, because it'll only get you so far. Corporate validation, that's real. Like, we're not here for that, but we're here for market trust. How do folks establish market trust with strong product leadership? And similar to genre cultural shifts where the container expands and not the core disappearing, right? So we want to expand the container, what product leadership is, but we don't want to take away the core of what product leadership is, if that makes sense. So, like I said earlier in this episode, this podcast is actually connected to the work that I'm already doing. And I'll go into my formal introduction of my background and such, but this work is part of a larger ecosystem. Like I said, this will be the live version of my already established year-long platform, Tech Tuesdays with KJ, for those who have supported Tech Tuesdays with KJ from the very beginning. Thank you so much. I really appreciate all the likes, comments, shares, the DMs of the questions that you have or the opportunities that you want to share with me because you appreciate the work that I do every week to bring product leadership to light on the LinkedIn platform. Also, this podcast itself is the live version of that. I also do have a newsletter called the Inside Solo Star newsletter. It's titled Solo Star by KJ Green on Substack, but formally the name of the newsletter is Inside Solo Star. You can find it at insidesolostar.substack.com. You can land there, and that's really an expansion of the thinking here on the podcast, an expansion from what I say on Tech Tuesdays. Again, I am in the tech and product space, but I am also a builder. Okay. I am knee deep in the AWS platform and building cloud, building AI capabilities. And tech is just a passion area of mine. Like I said, I'll go into my background, but that is really the essence of this ecosystem. This platform is optimized for future product leaders, collaborators, folks who just want the truth about product leadership. And it all falls under the umbrella of I don't want to say my company, but my future brainchild, if you will, called Solo Star. Solo Star is really the essence of this entire ecosystem. And for me, Solo Star is the essence of me as an individual, someone who never chose traditional paths, someone who desired to take my own path, build my own foundation, and not be subject or limited to the guardrails that institutions or people put on me. And I've always ran and did things with a solo mindset. Obviously, not going off the rails here, but that's essentially where how Solo Star came to be. And it's really the platform and ecosystem that all of my work flows through. I just want to give an introduction on myself. Like I said, my name is KJ Green. I grew up in the early 2000s. Okay. I grew up when tech was still, I won't say forming, coming real. When the internet came out, humor me for a little bit. If you're a millennial, Gen X, boomer, when the internet came out, it was a crazy time. Similar to what we're going through now, but the shift of just human intelligence shifted immensely with the advent of the internet and the internet becoming mainstream to everyone to be able to use. So I grew up in that era. I am a younger millennial and I am probably a part of the last analog generation. So I have typed on a typewriter, okay, when it was on its way out. I've typed on a typewriter. I think my first Windows operating system was Windows 95 or 98. Well, 98. Anyway, I wasn't grown old enough to be able to use Windows 95, but yeah, Windows 98. So, and I, saw the internet grow. But when I tell you, I've just seen so many shifts, technology shifts in my lifetime. And I grew up in the time of LimeWire. If you raise your hand, if you remember LimeWire and all of just the music stream, just the change in how music was streamed. If you were in that era, you know how music changed so much. Not necessarily the sound of music, but how the accessibility of music. I remember downloading off of LimeWire. We all did it. We all did it. There's no shame here. Downloading music on LimeWire. I remember the CD burning era. That was a time to be alive, but that was the first shift from music going from a physical object to digital. This was before Spotify. Spotify wasn't even thought of. YouTube was in its infancy stage. I remember when I first logged in on YouTube. Okay. I was trying to search for Destiny's Child Say My Name. If you know that song, you know. Okay. I had saw that song back in 99 when it first came out on MTV. And I was trying to find it on YouTube. But if you have dial up, you know it took forever. And dial up, the sound of dial up, getting on to dial up, we came from an era where the appreciation for technology that I have is at an all-time high because it was not as accessible or easy to use. Things were slow. I remember that video took almost a day to load on YouTube. This was the early days of YouTube. Early days of YouTube. I grew up in the early 2000s. I had a Razor flip phone. It was nice. I liked that phone. That was probably my first phone. What else? I saw the smartphone come to be in 7th grade in 2007 when Steve Jobs really had that great and grand announcement for combining the iPod and a phone into one. It's the iPhone, right? I lived through the 2010s era where after the iPhone was released, got through the 2008 recession. I was in 8th grade at that point. Please don't clock my age. Okay? I was in 8th grade at that point. Obama became president. First black president of my lifetime. We got to see the first black president. When I tell you millennial, we have lived through it all. We have lived through a lot. 9/11, first black president, '08. But going into the 2010s after the iPhone, I was in that era in high school where everything Wi-Fi was first like more accessible. We got off of dial-up. Wi-Fi was accessible in your coffee shops, in your Starbucks or whatever. The Wi-Fi that you're using now was essentially an expansion that was put into place in the late 2000s to allow individuals to have access to the internet. Okay, so that got us into the app era. Oh my gosh, everything required an app. You had an app for your vacuum, you had an app for your toothpaste, you had an app for everything. And we wanted to put Wi Fi on everything. Wi Fi for the vacuum, Wi Fi for the dishwasher, Wi Fi for the stove, Wi Fi for the refrigerator. My gosh. Okay. Another bubble, right? Another bubble. The 2010s was like the growth cycle of tech, the growth. And for me, during that time, I was kind of on both spectrums of this. So I was in high school for part of it, and I was in college for part of it, and I was in the military for part of it, and I was also a professional for part of it. So the 2010s was like 2010 to 2019 was the majority of my early 20s. Okay. And I was growing alongside this hyper growth in technology and was able to work for one of the largest tech companies you can look on my LinkedIn and see in the world. And this was the time when they were going through their hyper growth phase, right? But 2019 was actually, if we're being real, like the last normal year. That was the last normal year of life in tech. It's crazy now because I'm seeing on social media everyone having these 10-year remembrance posts of 2016. Because 2016 was a time, that's when I graduated college, excited out of the world, go ready to start my career. At that point, I was in the hospitality industry, starting my career in Atlanta, Georgia. 20 was a golden time. That was like the last time before life got hyper fast. hyper crazy. Social media was on matured-ish at that point towards the late 2010s, but I think to a degree was still kind of contained. Okay, now we let, COVID era, the world shut down, things got crazy. We were home. We were home for a great amount of time. Tech exploded. We did have a minor recession during that time once like the shutdowns kind of happened. But after that, it was like hyper growth in tech through 2021. And then the bubble began to burst 2022, late 2021. Well, 2021 was like the hyper growth. 2022 is when it started to burst. And then ChatGPT came, and then that opened the floodgates to all things AI. What a time to be alive. That's the life that I live. I've been in the tech industry at this point since about 2018, 2019. So you do the math, it's 2026. I've worked in corporate for about 10 years and I'm a two-time startup founder. I co-founded a AI gifting startup platform back in 2021 before ChatGPT, before all of this hype. So when people talk about vibe coding and using all these great AI tools. I prototyped, me and my co-founding team, we built that platform from scratch. Okay. We did not have the luxury of all these great tools. We did it. We did not. But you know what? It gives me appreciation for obviously the tools that we have today because it helps you to deploy and ship products a whole lot faster. To build that entire product from end to end, and at that point, it was just a website. It took like almost 6 months and a lot of investment. But now you can do that in a matter of minutes, really, on if you can vibe code well. I've seen a lot of shifts in the technology space. I've seen a lot of societal shifts in my years of living. And with that, I just want to bring just a realism of what I've seen to this podcast and wanting to bring on individuals who share the same vision. I'm excited for you to go alongside this journey with me. And this is really just a continuation of all the work that I've done within the past few years. And also, more importantly, the recent work that I did with Tech Tuesdays. This is just like a live version of me speaking rather than just written. That's it. I'm so glad that you were here with me for this first episode. Thank you so much. We have way more to come. And I'm excited, super, super excited to see where this podcast goes and how this benefits you all as a listening audience. Please let me know if you have any questions, thoughts, or concerns. I'm on LinkedIn. I will add my contact info for LinkedIn in the show notes, but please feel free to reach out. Again, I am KJ Green. I am a product leader, entrepreneur, and a lover of all things technology. Thank you so much for tuning in to the first episode of the Product Leaders Edge podcast. And I will see you all in the next episode. Have a great one and bye now.
Artlist.io. Music licensing reimagined. Artlist.io.
The views shared in this conversation are my own and based on personal experience. They do not represent the views of any employer or any organization I'm affiliated with.